Well, hey, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome back to the channel for this installment of Open Mic, the show where the mic is open, the floor, as they would say, is yours. What do you guys want to discuss and talk about? That's what we're here to do on this lazy Saturday afternoon. Good to have everybody here already. Mark, David, Iceness, Never Lose Your Nerd, Irene, Bryce, everybody who's here already. Thanks a lot for joining me here on this Saturday as we're going to do a little open mic and just hang out and talk about our favorite thing in the world, movies and streaming and TV and all that kind of good stuff, and anything else you guys might want to talk about. Listen, the way you get a topic or a question for me to address on open mic is simply by using the super chat feature in the live chat. So if you're watching live, and you got to be watching live, you can go ahead and use the super chat to send it in. Now, if you want to send in a question for the John Campea Show, that's Monday through Friday, you don't have to wait for that show to be live. You can anytime, 24 hours a day, use our tip link. That's right here at www.streamelements.com/JohnCampea/tip. You can use that and we'll address those questions on the John Campea Show Monday through Friday. And again, just like the super chats, as long as your topic or question is appropriate for me to address on the show, we'll address it here on the show. Good to have all you guys here. And listen, before we get jumping into your topics and questions, as always, picked out a little topic I wanted us to discuss before we get to those, if you'll indulge me. You know, Daredevil's coming. And a lot of us are very excited about it. I mean, we were still excited about Daredevil coming over into the MCU when it wasn't going to be the same Daredevil from Netflix. Like, it was going to be a brand new Daredevil. Charlie Cox was still going to play Daredevil. Vincent D'Onofrio was still going to be Kingpin. They were going to be very much like the Daredevil and Kingpin from the Netflix series, but they've made it clear it wasn't going to be the same. But then Kevin Feige, once he got his authority and power back, he changed his mind. They scrapped Daredevil Born Again series, all the stuff that they had shot, at least most of the stuff they had shot, and they said, we're starting over again. We are going to make it the same Daredevil and Kingpin from Netflix. They brought in Foggy, they brought in Karen, and they did the whole bit. But even before they did that, we were excited about it. And once they announced they were going to make it a continuation of the Daredevil series from Netflix, then people got a lot more excited about it. So anyway, the star of Daredevil, Charlie Cox, was recently at an event called AwesomeCon. And he does a lot of these conventions. I love that he does that. And he was speaking directly about something not a lot of people love, which is She-Hulk. Now, just for context, for those of you who may not know, most of you probably do, but I was very excited about the She-Hulk show, and I loved the first episode. Like, the first episode started, I thought, this is exactly right. This is the path we should be on. This is going to be a great show. Wah, wah. Not so much. It ended up being one of the most unfunny comedies I've seen, and there's very, very few things as uncomfortable and cringy than somebody or something trying to be funny when they are not. Normally, that's me. In this case, it was She-Hulk. And it became very unpleasant to watch. Very unpleasant to watch. But Daredevil was in it. And they had a little romance. And so Charlie Cox was asked about the idea of continuing the romance with She-Hulk in Daredevil. And surprisingly enough, it's something he said he really would like to do. This comes to us from Popverse, wrote the following. In 2022, She-Hulk rocked Daredevil's world, and now Charlie Cox wants an encore performance. Daredevil and She-Hulk shared an unlikely romance in the 2022 Disney Plus series She-Hulk, Attorney at Law. The two heroes sparred in the courtroom, tangled on the rooftops, and tangled in the bedroom. Found passion in the bedroom. This was a surprising direction for Marvel's two legal heroes who had much different relationships in the comics. Now, speaking at a crowd, at AwesomeCon 2024, Charlie Cox reflected on Jennifer Walters and Matt Murdock's wild fling. The Jen Walters stuff, the romance, we haven't really gotten a chance to explore much, Cox began. Hopefully one day we'll get an opportunity to do more stuff together, because I absolutely loved working with Tatiana Maslany, good Canadian girl, by the way. She is an incredible actor. And he goes on to say stuff like, he talks about the romance between him and Tatiana Maslany in She-Hulk. And he said, I found it funny. Like he said, I thought it was great. He said, there were some people that didn't like it, but I think it's hilarious. I thought it was great. And he directly mentions the walk of shame. Now, listen, as much as I have bagged on the She-Hulk show, and I've bagged a lot on it, admittedly, as much as I've bagged on it, I will always defend a couple of things about it. You know, in a show that's horrible, if I'm going to give a show its knocks, I got to give it its props when it's due. And there were a few things that worked. Personally, I thought one of the very few things that worked in She-Hulk Attorney at Law was the romance with Matt. She-Hulk and Daredevil. I thought the romance worked. I really did. I thought when they were on screen together, it was charming. It was adorable. It was adorable. It was absolutely adorable. These two had great, terrific chemistry together. Now, I know there's a lot of people who, if they don't like a movie or show, they absolutely refuse to say anything positive about it. I'm very much the opposite, right? If I have a movie I really like, I try to find some negatives. If there's a movie or show I hate, I try to find some positives. That was one of the positives for me. And the walk of shame at the end of She-Hulk is one of the funniest damn things I'd seen on TV in a couple of years. As Daredevil is doing the old walk of shame, he's even got his boots thrown over his shoulder, walking out on a Sunday morning, having just smashed with She-Hulk. It was great, okay? In a terrible show, it was one of those moments that was truly great. And F y'all, I still think the whole, what's it called again? When she's doing the booty shake with the, yeah, I thought that was hilarious. That was a totally She-Hulk thing to do. It was great. Not a lot. What else was good about She-Hulk? There were a few redeeming things. Again, the Matt Tatiana romance. I thought the booty shake thing was hilarious. And Wong and Madison. Madison and Wongers. I want that show. I'll watch that show. I don't care. In a show that was horribly unfunny, that was one of the very few things that was funny about it. Anyway, so, you know, in a big mess, there was a couple of breadcrumbs of things that were redeemable. Anyway, let's focus on She-Hulk and Daredevil here. So Charlie Cox comes out and says that he loved the romance with Tatiana. He thought it was great. He thought it was funny, and he would love to revisit it. Now, that is going to hit a lot of people in a bad way. I mean, I've been reading through, like, the live event got posted a few hours ago, and I've been reading through some of the stuff in the chat, and there's already a lot of people are saying, hell no. Hell no. Don't want that. But again, I think that is more a reflection of the fact that you didn't like the show. I think this worked. One of the few things that worked. And I'll tell you another reason why I liked it. In a world and in a television universe was where that just totally shit on Matt all the time. Life just craps on Matt, right? And even when he does try to have some romances in there, it's with totally damaged goods. Only he himself is damaged goods, by the way, but it's also with other damaged good candidate of the year, Elektra, or Karen, who has literally had a relationship with every main male lead in the show, or what, like, it's just everything. Even his romances have to have horrible, toxic baggage to him. You know what didn't? This didn't have baggage. This was just something nice for Matt. This was easy. It was uncomplicated. He just thought she was great, and she thought he was great, and all that kind of stuff. And they just got along wonderfully. and the world smiled on him, and she even introduced him to her parents and her cousin. You know, Hawaiian shirt wearing Hulk. We won't talk about that. But she even felt good enough to bring him to meet her parents. That's nice. And I just kind of like life having something nice for Matt, damn it. Life craps on him enough. All the shit he's got to put up with. Just let Matt have something nice. This was nice. Now, look, am I expecting to see Tatiana Maslany pop up in Daredevil Born Again? No, I do not. But could they have the two of them interact again? And I'll tell you what, I'll say the unpopular thing. I hope they do. I really do. I think it would be really nice because I like her character. I may not have liked the show. The show may have been bad, but the problem with the show wasn't the main character. Jennifer was a good character. Tatiana Maslany is a great performer and brought some real life to the character. And the problem with the show certainly wasn't the relationship. So I would like to see her back, just hopefully with something with much better writers. And I would love to see the two of them on screen again. Again, I know that's not going to be the popular opinion. I get that. I know it's not the popular opinion, but it is nonetheless something that I think. I think it would work really well. Anyway, guys, what do you think about this? About this potential for, Charlie Cox says he wants it. He wants to get that back again. He loved doing it. And I agree with him. Maybe you don't. Maybe you got some good reasons for not wanting it. Maybe you kind of think that, you know what, for Daredevil to be Daredevil, and I think there's validity to this. Maybe you're one of these people who thinks for Daredevil to be Daredevil, life's got to shit on Matt. I mean, for Matt to truly find some happiness, that kind of undermines Daredevil. Maybe you think that, and I would understand that thought, that point of view. But I don't know. Whatever you guys think, let me know. Either fire in a super chat about it or just leave it in the comments later, and let me know what you guys think. All right, guys, with that all down, we're now going to jump on over and start taking your live questions. But before we do, and as we do, we're going to pay some bills around here and thank one of the sponsors of our show here today, our friends at Cuts Clothing. Guys, we want to take a second to thank a sponsor of today's video, Cuts Clothing. Let's be real. Most guys would wear a t-shirt every day of their lives if we could. The problem is that most t-shirts are not acceptable to wear at work or out on a hot date. Today's sponsor, Cuts, has finally changed that. Cuts t-shirts are such high quality, wrinkle-free, and so buttery soft that you can look like you're dressing up even when you're dressing down. Yeah, you heard that right. They are wrinkle-free. And for a limited time, you can save money while redefining the dress code by heading to cutsclothing.com and use the code Campea for 20% off. Guys, you know me, when it comes to clothing, my number one priority is comfort, and I could not believe just how comfortable my Cuts shirt was. It was light, it breathed, it felt like $1,000,000, and it made me feel like I looked like $1,000,000 too. And the best part? Cuts Clothing is built to last. Their durable construction means you'll be enjoying your favorite shirts and pants for years to come, making them a smart investment for your wardrobe. So guys, for a limited time, our listeners get 20% off your entire order when you use the code Campea at checkout. That's 20% off your order at cutsclothing.com with the promo code Campea. Please support our show by telling them that the John Campea Show sent you. Experience the perfect blend of style and comfort with Cuts Clothing. And thank you to our friends at Cuts Clothing for sponsoring today's episode of Open Mic. All right, guys. With that down, let's get over to your questions here, shall we? And who are we starting off with? We're starting off with Tom Weinberg, who writes, finally watched Loki Season 2, and wow, best character arc in the MCU. It might be. I personally think the best character arc in the MCU is Wanda, but Loki's is fantastic too. My number one show on Disney Plus now. Love the way it tied time travel into the concept of stories. Yeah, listen, first of all, Loki is like my second or third favorite character in the MCU. Like I've always loved Loki right from the very first Thor movie. What Tom Hiddleston does with that character is just wonderful, and I love the character. I didn't love Loki Season 1. I liked it, but I didn't think it was great. I think Loki Season 2 was a definite improvement. And they did some really cool conceptual stuff and whatever. I still have some gripes with Season 2, to be honest with you, but I thought it improved upon what was already a good show. Now, to me, the best show on Disney Plus for Marvel, at any rate, is still by a mile WandaVision. Like, WandaVision to me is just by miles the best thing they've done. I think the second best thing they've done was Ms. Marvel, and I think Loki season 2 is probably my third favorite. Then after that might be Falcon and Winter Soldier, and then maybe Loki season 1, and then maybe after that would be Moon Knight, and then maybe after Moon Knight would be Hawkeye. Anyway, the point is, Loki season 2 was a big step in the right direction, and I thought it gave a really nice quote unquote conclusion to one of my favorite characters in the MCU. All right, thanks for that, Tom. Next up, we got Amin, who writes, I know it's a prequel and all, but should I watch Furiosa before Fury Road? I haven't seen any of the Mad Max films either. You know, that came up the other day. First of all, Furiosa is great. I'm not going to say it's better than Fury Road, but it's great. George Miller does it again. But it's not doing fabulous at the box office. I mean, it's doing pretty good at the box office compared to what other movies have been doing lately. But for a movie as expensive as it is, it's not doing great. We'll see what the final box office numbers are tomorrow. Anyway, Furiosa is fantastic. I honestly think you're in a really good position that if you have not seen Fury Road, I think you can go and watch Furiosa anyway, and I think you'll be fine. But since Furiosa comes before, chronologically, Fury Road, you're also fine to watch Furiosa first and then go and watch Fury Road. What I would suggest, though, is that if you do go to watch Furiosa first, as soon as the credits start, leave. Because in the credits, they do some quick glimpses and footage from Fury Road, and it was great for somebody who had already seen Fury Road because it's like a reminder of what comes later, right? But if you haven't seen Fury Road yet, you're totally good to see Furiosa first. Just leave as soon as the credits start. Otherwise, see Fury Road first. And I think you're totally good that way too. At least that's the way I see it. All right. I got to disagree with our viewer, Mitsuyo, though. He says they should have had Charlize Theron back. No, that wouldn't have worked. Especially for those that have seen the movie that know why. Nah. No, they should not have brought Charlize Theron back. It would have been such an awkward... The whole de-aging thing just would have been a distraction through the whole thing. I don't think it would have served the story. And Anya Taylor-Joy is great in it. I'm not saying she's better than Charlize Theron. I'm just saying she played a younger Furiosa great. I think it would have been a mistake to bring Charlize back. At least that's how I see it. All right. Next up, we got Harves K, who writes, Hey, John, I highly recommend Tokyo Vice. Anson Elgort's face notwithstanding, it scratches the Shogun itch, an outsider in a foreign and often violent world, but instead of samurai, it's the Yakuza. Yeah, listen, I'll tell you what, it's so funny because when that show was first coming out, I remember thinking, because I said before, I think Ken Watanabe's in it. I'm not 100% sure, but I think he is. And I love Ken Watanabe. I'll watch anything with him in a minute. And when I first saw the first trailers for it, I thought, this is something I absolutely have to watch. I got to watch this. But I never got around to it. I just never got around to it. And so I didn't see season 1. And then I think season 2 is out right now, right? Yeah, so I still haven't gotten around to it. But anyway, I think I'm going to have to try it. I'm going to have to give it a shot because it looks great to me. I've heard a lot of people tell me it's really good, Harves. So you're just the latest person to tell me it's good. So I'll probably have to get on that and see it sooner rather than later. All right. Let's see. Next up, we've got Chris Miner, who writes, going to DM my first D&D campaign. Any advice? So you're going to Dungeon Master wait a minute. Is this your first time playing Dungeons and Dragons, or it's just your first time being the Dungeon Master? Because I would not recommend being the Dungeon Master if it's your first time playing the game. So I'm going to assume, but tell me in the live chat if you're still here, if it is. I'm going to assume you're just saying that it's just your first time DMing. The biggest piece of advice I would give to anybody who's going to be the game master of a role-playing game, and I play a lot of them, is this. Just remember, the game is not you versus the players. A lot of dungeon masters or game masters, even very well-intentioned ones, fall into that mindset. Remember, it is not you versus the players. You are a facilitator for the players to explore a story. And just remember, sometimes the players aren't going to do what you kind of thought they would do, and you got to be willing and ready to adapt. So again, just remember, it's not you versus the players. Have a lot of fun, Chris. I hope you have a good time doing it. All right, next up. Luke S. writes, hey, John, saw Furiosa last night. All in all, it was a good film, but CGI was a bit wobbly. Yes, it was. In parts, and could have been edited down a little. Anya Taylor-Joy is great. Anya Taylor-Joy is great, but, that's something me and Ray both said, too. Ray and I both love the movie. But where it really shines is when it's practical. The CGI was a little bit wonky. At least some of it was. Like, there may have been a bunch of CGI in it that we never even realized was CGI. It was that good, but there were definitely some moments in it that were a bit wonky. 100% agree with you. And I also agree it could have been edited down a bit. Right? I think it ended up being like 2 hours and 28 minutes. If this was like a 2 hour and 15-minute movie, I think it would have felt a lot tighter. But still, overall, I thought the movie was great. I loved it. All right, next up. We've got Brandon, who writes, geez, the box office for Furiosa is looking bleak. Well, I mean, it's looking better compared to a lot of other movies, but for a movie of its budget, yeah, again, don't read into it too much until we get the final numbers tomorrow, so we'll just see how that goes. All right, next up, Mark W. just sends in a super chat badge. Thank you, Mark W. Appreciate that, man. Christopher Brickner writes, one of two. It is 5 years since Rise of Skywalker, and I don't see any toys / merchandise for the sequel trilogy. I actually see a bunch of it. Not that that justifies it, but I actually see a bunch of it. Anyway, I have more merch for the Clone Wars show. Absolutely not. I have not. Listen, I have started going to Disneyland again, not because I want to, just to be clear about that, but the number one job and responsibility I have in my life is to serve my wife. My number one job in my life is to take care of, protect, and try to make my wife as happy as possible. My wife does a lot of things that I love for me. And I need to be, she loves going to Disneyland. And, I said this on an open mic about a month or so ago. She loves me going to Disneyland with her. So even though she knows I don't like it, I go to Disneyland with her now once in a while because I'm a good husband. At least I try to be. And when I go to Disneyland, I see an awful lot of merchandise. Like, I lost count of how many little girls and stuff like that I see running around dressed as Rey. I don't see anybody dressed as anybody from Bad Batch, or I don't see anybody running around, no kids running around dressed as, whatever else. But I do see a bunch of that. Now, I'm not saying like a whole ton of it, but I do personally see a lot of it. Anyway, let's get back to your question here. Let me just get to your question here again. The only Star Wars merchandise was a First Order TIE Fighter, which is an OT TIE Fighter colored black, says how much an impact the Star Wars characters left. I saw merch for Cody, Rex, and Ventress, but no Rey. Again, I've seen probably, without exaggeration, I think the ratio is 100 to 1. How many times I've seen somebody like cosplay as, a young Rey as opposed to any of those characters you mentioned. But that side, merchandise and stuff like that. My experience has not been the same as yours. But I think the core point you're making, though, was that the sequel trilogy did not make an impact. I think that's accurate. It's not accurate to say that there's no merchandising and that kids don't still dress up as them and all that kind of stuff, because they do. But I agree with your core premise here that the the prequels, well, I think neither the prequels nor the sequel trilogy have really had a true impact outside of negative stuff. So I think that essentially is true. It's also true, though, that merchandise isn't as big as it used to be, just in general, right? There's not a lot of Lord of the Rings merchandise out there. I'm just saying, for an example, I don't see a lot of people dressing up as Lord of the Rings, and yet no one's going to take away what a big impact it has too. So I'm not sure that merchandise is our guiding North Star in determining on how much of an impact something has had. But I do agree that I don't think the sequel trilogy had much of a cultural impact. All right. Next up, Sebastian Gomez writes, "Hey, John, what's worse, Madam Web or Catwoman?" Oh, that's easy. Catwoman, easy. See, Madam Web is horrible. It's horrible. Make no mistake about it. I've talked ad nauseum about how horrible it is. It is a contender. It is a contender for maybe the worst film of 2024. And it may not even end up being the worst film of 2024, but it's a contender for the worst film of 2024. Catwoman is a contender for the worst film of all time. When talking about big Hollywood-produced, wide-released movies, because I'm sure you'll find worse little indie films, but we're talking about Hollywood-produced, wide-release films. Yeah, Madam Web is a contender for worst film of 2024. Catwoman is a contender for worst film of all time. To me, it's all subjective, of course. It's all subjective. But yes, easily Catwoman is, Madam Web's bad, but Catwoman is worse. All right. Zachary Schatzter writes, "Hey, John, from everything I've seen, Deadpool and Wolverine looks like it'll be good, but if it sucks, how much do you think it would impact the box office? Also, how depressed would you be?" Oh, well, I'll be depressed. No. Disappointed. Oh my God. Yes. It's actually difficult for me to kind of even formulate how disappointed I will be if Deadpool and Wolverine isn't good. Partially because I'm a giant fan of the Deadpool franchise, and partially because I'm a big fan of Ryan Reynolds. Now, don't forget, I will give bad reviews to Ryan Reynolds films, as I have for a couple of his more recent ones. Red Notice is terrible, Six Underground is terrible, all that kind of stuff. So I can deal with being disappointed in a Ryan Reynolds film, but I am a massive fan of Deadpool. And so I will be very disappointed if it doesn't. Now, how much will it affect the box office if it's bad? It won't affect the opening weekend, right? Because people got to get out to see it first for there to be any kind of word of mouth. So the opening weekend won't be impacted by whether or not the movie's all that good or all that bad. What it will impact is the final number. So let's say, God forbid, that Deadpool and Wolverine is awful. Let's, for argument's sake, it's hard for me to believe that it would be, but let's, for argument's sake, say that Deadpool and Wolverine is terrible. Okay. I still think it makes money, but it takes it from being what I believe will be a $1 billion film to like a $650 million film. That's a significant impact for this movie. Now, if the movie is as good as I think it'll be, it's a $1 billion film. I think easy, it's a $1 billion film. But if word gets out that it's yet another disappointing, mediocre comic book movie that we've had a bunch of lately, I think a lot of people are just going to take a pass. I think people are hungry to find a comic book movie that they love again. And I think this can be that movie. I don't think that everybody's going to go out opening weekend, but I think they're going to wait. They're going to hear that the movie's great. They're going to go. The movie's going to make $1 billion. But if this movie is bad, it's still going to be profitable. It's still going to make money, but it'll end up being a bit of a disappointment, coming in around, I think, $650 million. So yes, I think it's going to impact its box office a great deal, depending if it's good or bad. All right. Thanks a lot for that, Zachary. Next up, we got Bobby Jackson who writes, "Hey, John, I know what you consider spoilers, but I'm curious. If you didn't know there was a twist for sugar, would you have predicted it and or enjoyed it more had you not know a twist was coming?" See, here's the thing though, Bobby. Almost everything has a twist, right? Like most movies in their stories will have something that the parameters of the story shift, something that takes it. For example, let's take one of my truly favorite little romantic comedy movies that I think is absolutely underrated, not talked about enough, Crazy Stupid Love. Remember that? With Steve Carell, Emma Stone, Ryan Gosling, Marissa Tomei, Julianne Moore. Anyway, Crazy Stupid Love. Let me know in the live chat if you've seen it. It's great. If you haven't seen it, you should watch it. It's wonderful. Now, I'm about to give a spoiler for that movie. Okay? So if you don't want to know the spoiler, here, I'm just going to put up this tip link again, okay? Mute your computer right now until I take the tip link down, okay? If you don't want to know what the spoiler is, okay? Ready? I hope you're muted by now. All right. So in Crazy Stupid Love, Ryan Gosling finds out that Emma Stone is actually Steve Carell's daughter. That changes our perception of the movie, right? That is a twist. It is, by definition, a twist. It may not be a twist on the same level of, I was going to say Signs. What's the I See Dead People movie again? Well, anyway, where Bruce Willis has been dead the whole time. Maybe not a twist on that level, but it's still a twist. Okay, I'm going to take this down. So you can turn your audio back on now. So most good movies all have a twist. I go into most stories, particularly dramatic ones, assuming there's going to be some form of a twist, right? Knowing there's a twist in a movie to me does not spoil anything because I go into almost every movie expecting there to be some form of a twist, some form of a thing that shakes up the storyline so it's not just what you think is going to be a predictable through point. Most movies have it. Sometimes they're bigger, like Sixth Sense. That was the name of the movie, Sixth Sense. Sometimes they're bigger, like Sixth Sense. Sometimes they're smaller, like Crazy Stupid Love. But most of them have. Not all, but most of them do. So, yeah, going into watching Sugar, I did hear there was a twist. People said there's a twist in Sugar. Okay, but I assumed that anyway. And just watching the episodes, particularly the episodes where, Colin Farrell is going to that reunion, it was the reunion that made me guess what the twist was. But even if somebody didn't tell me there was a twist, that reunion clearly let us know that something's going on, right? The reunion episode clearly tells the audience there is something important that we don't know. That clearly all these characters at the reunion know that we as the audience don't know. Ergo, a twist. So even if somebody hadn't told me there was a twist in Sugar, the reunion episode would have made it clear to me that there's a big twist here somewhere. And then I just happened to guess what the twist was. A couple of other people have too, but anyway, yeah. So that's just me. My starting assumption, Bobby, is that there's a twist in a story. If there's a story, there's probably a twist of some kind. Not everybody would see it that way or define it that way, but that's how I see it. All right. Thanks for asking, Bobby. All right. Bobby also asks, with the Hollywood Reporter reporting that Damon Lindelof is working on the Green Lantern TV series, do you think it's more likely we actually see it, or do you think it will stay in development hell? Well, here's the thing though. Green Lantern has been in development hell for a long time, but this is a different thing now. James Gunn and Peter Safran are now here. And they're doing, from what I hear, something like a True Detective style Green Lantern show, which I think that concept is awesome. I don't know if it'll turn out good or not, but I love it. Damon Lindelof is also somebody who takes a bad rap sometimes, but I think he's a really imaginative, creative writer. Not that I've liked everything he's done. I haven't, but I've liked a lot of what he's done. So I'm going to go out on a limb, Bobby, and say, I think this is going to happen. When it happens, how quickly it happens, I'm not really sure, but I do think it's going to happen. All right. Thanks for that, Bobby. Appreciate the questions, man. Next up, we got Imposter who writes, "Hey, John, I was wondering, why is it since Lord of the Rings that we don't really see fantasy movies anymore? Excluding The Green Knight and the recent Dungeons and Dragons movie, I wish we got more stuff like it." You know what? This is a question that we as movie fans have been talking about for 20 years. Like, if you go back, when the first Lord of the Rings came out, particularly, with the first one that came out, Fellowship of the Ring, a lot of people believed that this is it. With the big success and the pop cultural relevance of Lord of the Rings, we're going to see so many sword and sandal movies now. We're going to get a big influx of fantasy and all this kind of stuff. And there were a few things. But that flood never came. That huge influx of a huge resurgence of the fantasy sword and sandal movies, that never really came. And what I hypothesize, and I might be right, I might be wrong, and I know others feel the same way too, is that what we thought Lord of the Rings was going to do, open up the floodgates for fantasy films, I think the exact opposite happened. Because what I think may have happened was producers looked at Lord of the Rings and said, we can't touch that. And it's not that every movie, any fantasy movie needs to be as good as Lord of the Rings, but I think what a lot of them did, they looked at it and said, if we make a fantasy film now, everybody's going to compare it to Lord of the Rings. And our movie is not going to compare well to Lord of the Rings. And I honestly think that, and I've talked to a couple of producers about that, and they have some different opinions too. Some agree with me though, that I think that when that movie was just so good, I mean, we're talking about, arguably speaking, the Lord of the Rings trilogy are arguably some of the greatest films ever made in history. Like, I look at Lord of the Rings kind of as one film, right? The way I look at the original Star Wars trilogy as one film. So like, Star Wars to me is the greatest film of all time. And I include Empire and Return of the Jedi with that. And I think the Lord of the Rings films are in that top 3 or 4 as well, along with The Godfather and stuff like that. But like, they made it so good that nobody else wanted to do it. Nobody else wanted to try. And by the way, Dungeons and Dragons, great movie. Nobody went to go see it. Totally flopped. Wonderful film. If you guys didn't see that Dungeons and Dragons movie, I think it's on Amazon Prime. Go see it, sit down one day, grab some food, have a drink beside you, pop it on and watch it and enjoy. And you don't even have to be a Dungeons and Dragons player to enjoy it. I think it was made specifically so Dungeons and Dragons players would get a big kick out of it, but that totally people who are not Dungeons and Dragons, that maybe that's what hurt Dungeons and Dragons, is the fact that I think there were probably a lot of people that looked at it and said, well, I don't play Dungeons and Dragons, so I won't get it. And maybe they took a pass on the movie. Maybe they didn't do a good enough job marketing the fact that, hey, this movie's called Dungeons and Dragons, but it is for everybody. You don't have to have been a player. Because I think a lot of people, I've been told, I actually had some of you guys write into me when the movie was coming out saying, I've never played Dungeons and Dragons, so I don't know that, can I go see this movie? I think maybe that keeps a lot of people away. Anyway, we're talking about Lord of the Rings. So that's why I don't think, I get distracted easy. I don't know if you've noticed that. I think that's why we didn't get that big influx of fantasy movies after Lord of the Rings. It was just too good. And nobody wanted to be compared to it. I think that's something that happens to this day. I think it's one of the reasons you don't see a lot of mafia movies, because I think people are still going to compare it to The Godfather. I mean, you get a few here and there, just like you get a few fantasy movies here and there. But I mean, I think everybody's afraid of being compared to Lord of the Rings and The Godfather, and I don't blame them. Anyway, great question, Imposter. All right, next up, we've got Bobby Jackson again, who writes, with the record-breaking pre-sale tickets for Deadpool and Wolverine, I really hope this is the final piece of evidence for people that think pieces need to prove there was never comic book movie fatigue. Yeah, I look, this is a discussion we've had many times, but I still cringe when I see people say, oh, there's comic book movie fatigue. There's not. There just isn't. You know why? Because for 17 years, this is not hyperbole, You go back to my movie blog days. You go back to my AMC days. You go back to the Collider days. For 17 years, I've been fielding questions for 17 years from people of, hey, I think it's comic book movie fatigue. I think comic book movie fatigue setting in. I think comic book movie fatigue is here. I think it's about to hit comic book movie fatigue. I think we're having comic book movie fatigue for 17 years. And yet they just kept rolling and kept succeeding, and everybody's going to them and everybody's loving them until they started not to be as great as often. You think it's a coincidence? You think it's just, out of 17 years, that suddenly it was a coincidence that around the time that Marvel started to have a decline in quality and interest started to wane in the movies, you think it's a coincidence that both of those happened at the same time? It's not a coincidence. It's cause and effect. For 17 years, comic book movie fatigue's coming, and clearly it wasn't, because the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies and the genre as a whole, yes, there were some misses, but for the most part, people knew that when they went to a comic book movie, particularly an MCU movie, they knew they were going to have a great time. You guys heard me say this before, right? It used to be in the MCU that when I went to a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, I expected to have a great time. Today, when I go to a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, I hope I have a good time. I expected I was going to have a great time. Today, I hope I have a good time. You think it's a coincidence that those two things happened at the same time? It's not a coincidence. It's cause and effect. As the quality and consistency of the quality of comic book films started to wane and decline, obviously then interest started to decline. If the Marvel Cinematic Universe had kept firing on all cylinders after Endgame, I guarantee you nobody would be talking about comic book movie fatigue today. I mean, they'd be talking about it the same way they've been talking about it for the last 17 years. People are not tired of comic book movies. They're tired of subpar comic book movies. There is not comic book movie fatigue. There is mediocre movie fatigue. That's what it is. And if they can turn, if Deadpool, listen, and what happened? Guardians of the Galaxy 3 came out. It's a great movie. $800+ million. Right? If Deadpool and Wolverine is good, and that's a big if, but if Deadpool and Wolverine is great and makes $700, $800, $900, $1 billion, it just proves again, there is no comic book movie fatigue. It's damn mediocre fatigue. Audiences are tired of getting excited and going to a movie theater expecting for something great and walking out with something They're getting tired of it. I'm getting tired of it. You're getting tired of it. None of us are tired of great comic book movies. None of us are tired of that, right? Any of you going to say that you are tired of great comic book movies? No, you're tired of going to a movie, getting excited, and then being let down. That's what we're tired of. And if they can turn it around and hopefully Deadpool and Wolverine will be a big part of turning that around. It won't be enough all by itself, but hopefully it'll be one of the steps, and hopefully we can get back to it. Anyway, thanks for the question, man. Next up, Darth Hideous writes, thanks for all you and your crew do. Thank you so much, Darth Hideous. The show has been a great source of distraction for me in hard times. Whenever I felt alone, y'all are there. Dude, listen, the movies and the movie fan community have been there for me my whole life. I've always said, and I'll always continue to say, one of the many great things about movies and the community that watches them is that they don't provide an escape, they provide an oasis. No matter when I've been going through garbage in my life, and I've gone through garbage in my life, you know, being able to sit down and watch a great movie or have a conversation with people about a great movie, you know, it just gives my thoughts, my brain, my emotions, it gives me a little bit of an oasis, a chance to take a break from whatever is my problems are, a chance to catch my breath, a chance to refresh a little bit. And when I come out of watching that movie, or when I come out of that conversation with friends about movies, the problems are still there, right? That doesn't change. But I'm just in a little bit better of a position to deal with them. My imagination's been sparked. I feel more invigorated. I've had a little bit of a moment of refreshing, and I'm able to be there. And one of the things that I've always wanted, when I started the movie blog, this is going back, and I'm sorry if I'm going off on a little bit of a rabbit trail here, but when I was doing the movie blog, and I created the world's first movie podcast, it was even before the term podcast had been coined. We did the movie blog, the audio edition, right? I wanted to make sports radio because I listen to sports radio all the time. I wanted to make sports radio for movies, right? So we created this podcast called, before it was even called a podcast, we just called it the audio show, the movie blog, the audio edition. One of the reasons that I wanted to do that was because I wanted it to be a place, I wanted it to be a virtual water cooler where me and people like me can just gather around and take our mind off everything else for a little bit and just talk about movies. And I'm glad this show can be that for you, Darth Hideous, and the movies can be that for you. And by the way, if you need more of it, the John Campea Show is not the only place. There's a lot of great places online. Don't go any of those toxic bullshit places. But I mean, there's a lot of great, wonderful, healthy online blogs, podcasts, YouTube channels, things like that, websites, to go and just have that. And that's the beautiful thing about movies, man. And I'm glad we can be a part of that with you, dude. All right. Next up, we've got E Young 98 writes, just rewatched the first 3 Pirates of the Caribbean movies. Might be one of my trilogies of movies. You probably meant to say favorite. Might be one of my favorite trilogies of movies. What are your opinions on the pirate movies? It's funny you bring that up. We were actually talking about Pirates, the franchise, Pirates of the Caribbean, the other day on the show. Here's my thoughts, okay? I thought them even making, this is going way back when the first movie was coming out, I thought them even making a Pirates of the Caribbean movie was a stupid idea. I did. I admit it. I remember saying on the movie blog all the time, this is the dumbest idea. You are making a movie based on a theme park ride? Are you an idiot? This is stupid. And then I saw the first one. I have no problems telling you I love the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie. I love it. Johnny Depp as Captain Jack. Barbossa is like one of my favorite antagonists in a movie. Keira Knightley, Orlando Bloom. I mean, I love Jeffrey Rush is so good in that. I love that first movie. It's absolutely fantastic and incredible. And I think Depp, if I'm not mistaken, I think Johnny Depp got an Academy Award nomination for that. Again, I might be wrong, but I think he did. At any rate, I'm not a huge fan of any of the other Pirates of the Caribbean movies. I'll be honest with you. I don't get me wrong. There are 1 or 2 of the other Pirates of the Caribbean movies, particularly the one with Bill Nye as Davy Jones. There's a couple of other Pirates of the Caribbean movies that I enjoyed, but I never loved it again the way I loved the first one. One of the reasons we talked about this the other day is that they took Captain Jack from the way they portrayed him in the first movie to eventually more and more he just became a clown, which was not enjoyable for me to watch. But at any rate, so there's a couple of them after the first one that I liked, but none of them that I loved again like I love that first one, man. That first one is such a special movie. It's really, really good. Anyway, all right, next up. We've got Never Lose Your Nerd 2.0 who writes, going to see Furiosa on Sunday. I'm not a fan of the Mad Max movies and didn't like Fury Road. But I love Anya and my wife loves looking at Hemsworth. Well, she's going to get an eye full of Chris Hemsworth. Chris Hemsworth never saw a shirt that he didn't like taking off. Just Gonna put that out there. Put that on a t-shirt. Chris Hemsworth never saw a shirt that he didn't like taking off. And who are we kidding? If any of us had his physique, we'd be taking off shirts all the time. As a matter of fact, let's do this. No, I'm not gonna do that. And no, Antonio, too sexy. Anyway, I hope you love it. I loved it. I hope you love it. But I unfortunately feel pretty safe in saying if you didn't like Fury Road, I don't know that you're going to like Furiosa. Because honestly, I think if you liked Fury Road, I think you're going to like Furiosa. I don't know that you're going to like it. But hey, listen, Anya's great in it. Chris Hemsworth is fantastic in it. He doesn't just look good. He's fantastic in this movie. So I hope you guys have a good time. All right, next up. We got Mickey, who writes, this isn't directly related to today's topic. That's fine. This is open mic, man. We're here to talk about what you want to talk about. But I find it really odd that Marvel, we're opting to have X-Men 97 be a continuation from the OG show, but not have the DDB. Guys, please don't write in acronyms. Please don't write in acronyms. But not have DDBA in the same camp. I don't know what to tell you. Oh, you're saying Daredevil Born Again. Okay, guys, please don't write in acronyms. Not have Daredevil. Well, it is, right? It wasn't going to be. And remember, X-Men 97 is not canon to the MCU. It's its own little thing. Like the X-Men animation and X-Men 97 are not canon to the MCU. It's its own little thing. And it's great. Daredevil was not going to be a part of the MCU. The new Daredevil was not going to be a continuation of the Netflix. But you remember a few months ago when they scrapped and trashed all the stuff they filmed, or at least most of the stuff they filmed for Daredevil Born Again, they went back to the drawing board, and now it is. So it wasn't, and I understood why. And I was completely okay that they weren't going to make this Daredevil as the same Daredevil as before. That's okay. But I'm really glad they did do this. And yeah, so no worries. The Daredevil Born Again is a continuation of the Netflix series, the characters you knew and love, and now they're in the MCU. I don't know that they're bringing everything over from that universe, but they're definitely bringing over him. All right. Let's see. Next up. Thanks for that, Mickey. Next up, we got Darth Hideous, who writes, in a hypothetical where Feige/Iger said they were going to stop caring about interconnections and go full Fox X-Men, would you mind all that much? That is a great question. Now, for those of you not really sure what it is Darth is talking about, if you guys remember, the Fox X-Men universe, which I thought overall was quite good, although it had a couple of big spectacular misses. For sure it did. But overall, I really like the Fox X-Men universe. X-Men 1, X-Men 2, obviously Logan, the greatest of them all, Days of Future Past, First Class, right? They had a number of great ones. And then they had some bad ones. But they never stuck to a continuity. They didn't really have canon. There were things that were consistent, but then within the things that were consistent, there was a bunch of things they changed. Wait a minute, I thought Tyler Mane was Sabretooth. What's Liev Schreiber doing here? I always said that the big mantra of Fox was, when it comes to X-Men, continuity, schmontinuity. They simply didn't care. Wait a minute. How can that be that guy when we were supposed to have seen that guy already in another one of the movies and he wasn't there? He was continuity, schmontinuity. So they had kind of a canon, but they never really cared about sticking to it, right? And that just is what it is. It just is what it is. So, what if Marvel decided to do the same thing? I'd be okay with it. Now, don't confuse what I just said with, I hope they do that. That's not what I said. I said, if they did it, I'd be okay with it. Charlie the Unicorn just said just summed up what I'm thinking better than I was saying. Don't let canon get in the way of a good movie. At the end of the day, what really and the only thing that matters is that the movie we go in to sit and watch is a good movie. That's the only thing that matters. I've seen bad movies that tie in perfectly to other movies, but that didn't stop it from being a bad movie. I've seen great movies that didn't tie in so well to other movies, but it's a great movie. At the end of the day, all that matters is that movies are great. Now, would I hope that they can continue on the proper canon interconnectiveness of the universe? Yes. I think in an ideal world, all other things being equal, I would prefer that. That being said, if they went away from that and just said exactly what Charlie said, don't let canon get in the way of a good movie, I say make the best movies you can. At the end of the day, make the best movies possible. And if you get to a point that you feel you need to break away from your canon to do that, then do that. I mean, I hope you don't have to. I would prefer it if you didn't have to, but if you do, you do. Because at the end of the day, the most important thing is making the best movies possible. And if you got to do that to do it, then do it. Anyway, good question, man. I like that question. All right. Al writes, since you saw Garfield, enchiladas or lasagna, dude, what? Okay. Al, do you know my real name? I feel like I'm on Breaking Bad. Come on guys in the live chat. What's my name? Say my name. Anybody in the live chat know what my name is? And want to let Al know what my name is? R2B2. Got it. My actual real name, for some who didn't know, is Giovanni. That is my real name. I'm named after my grandfather, Giovanni, who came over in the boat with his young teenage son, Pasquale, which is my dad. And Giovanni came over with his brothers, Carlo, Vincenzo, Romolo, and Sergallo. Are you asking me if I prefer something or lasagna? Really? Anything. Or lasagna. I'm going to let you think about that. I'm going to let you think about what you did. I'm going to make you go stand in the corner. Yes, Al. So, yes, clearly for me, lasagna. Lasagna is definitely the thing I'm going for. All right. Andy writes, thanks. Andy writes, one of two. 2 days ago was the 10-year anniversary of X-Men Days of Future Past. No, it was not. Was it really the 10-year anniversary of that? Oh my God. Anyway, it's still in the top 5 greatest comic book movies ever. It was my most favorite film of 2014. I still can't believe it was 2014 that came out, among many cool films that year. I don't know that I have it in my top 5, but I've always say that X-Men Days of Future Past is absolutely in the top 10 greatest comic book movies ever. Ann and I just rewatched it again about 2 or 3 months ago. And every time I watch that movie, like, I don't know why. When I watch that movie, I kind of like, I'm probably not going to like it as much this time. But then I watch it and I'm like, no, this is even better than I remember. X-Men Days of Future Past is truly one of the greatest comic book films ever made. It's absolutely wonderful. Now, I know whenever I bring it up, some people like Q in the live chat saying Rogue Cut is the best. I finally got around to seeing Rogue Cut. Movie didn't need it. I love Anna Paquin as Rogue. Don't get me wrong. And I liked the deleted scenes. I did. But Days of Future Past didn't need the Rogue footage. It didn't need it. It was nice stuff. It was great, but it didn't need it. Anyway. So, yeah, man, I'm with you. Maybe not top 5. Because then you're competing with films like Dark Knight. I'm saying these in no particular order. Dark Knight, the original Avengers movie, which I still think is the best comic book movie ever made, to be honest. Logan, that's your top 3. To me, that's your top 3. Dark Knight, Logan, the first Avengers film. Then you're also competing things like Captain America, Winter Soldier, or Civil War, or, if you're talking to John Campea, Man of Steel, it's going to be in the conversation somewhere. Sorry for all those you don't like Man of Steel. I think it's a truly great comic book movie. Anyway, top 5 is tough, but I definitely feel good putting it in the top 10. I definitely feel good having it in the top 10. All right, guys, with that down, we're going to take a quick break here. And just so you know, I'm going to turn off the super chats here in just a minute. So you've got another minute or so if you want to get in another question or two, to go ahead and do that. But before we get to the last round of questions, we're going to take a second to thank a couple more sponsors of today's episode of Open Mic, our friends at Liquid IV and the Wellness Company. Guys, we want to thank the sponsor of today's video, Liquid IV. You know, it seems like summer's just designed to make us thirsty, whether it's camping, hiking, playing sports, and staying hydrated is the key to making the most of every moment. Because summer requires extraordinary hydration that's built for everyday dehydrating moments. Liquid IV hydrates you with benefits like electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients. With 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink, plus 8 vitamins and nutrients in a single stick, it's clearly why Liquid IV is the #1 powdered hydration brand in America. It has 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink. Just tear, pour, and live more. Just 1 stick plus 16 ounces of water hydrates better than water alone. With 8 vitamins and nutrients, non-GMO and free from gluten, dairy, and soy. There's no artificial colors or sweeteners, and it's got 4 delicious sugar-free flavors: white peach, green grape, raspberry melon, and lemon lime. So turn your ordinary water into extraordinary hydration with Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use the code Campea at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code Campea at liquidiv.com. Guys, we want to thank a sponsor of today's video, The Wellness Company. Okay, so you wake up with a scratchy throat, congestion, runny nose, and cough. You know your body. You know you're getting sick. So your choices are tough it out, get sick and take time off work, or hope the doctor can see you this month, or wait 2 hours at urgent care and sit in a room full of sick people, or open your medical emergency kit. Match your symptoms to the doctor-recommended prescription. Start on the right meds and nip this in the bud now. Your medical emergency kit is not a first aid kit. It comes with doctor-prescribed meds to treat over 39 medical issues. Strong antibiotics for infections of all types, strep throat, pneumonia, UTIs, bronchitis, and so much more. Plus, a doctor's easy guide so you'll know exactly what to take and when. There's no waiting to see the doctor, no waiting at the pharmacy. It's all in here. Every home should have at least 1 medical emergency kit. Order yours online in just minutes. Your kit will be rushed right to your door, and you can get 15% off at twc.health/Campea and use promo code Campea when you check out. That's promo code Campea at twc.health/Campea. And thank you to our friends at Liquid IV and the Wellness Company for sponsoring today's episode. All right, guys, with that down, let's get back to your questions here, shall we? We're going to pick things up here with Al, who wrote, oh yeah, I heard about this. RIP to Morgan Spurlock, director of Super Size Me. Yeah, listen, notwithstanding, I understand Morgan Spurlock got into some controversy and got himself into trouble, and I'm not here to talk about that. Not that it shouldn't be talked about in other places, just not here right now. Super Size Me, you know, there's a couple of documentaries every once in a while, because not everybody's into documentaries, right? I would venture to say a lot of people aren't into documentaries, unfortunately. But every once in a while, a documentary will come along that kind of catches everybody's attention and gets new people into documentaries. Like or dislike his personal politics, Bowling for Columbine, right, was definitely one of those documentaries. And Super Size Me, I think another couple ones like Kong, A Fistful of Quarters, King of Kong, A Fistful of Quarters, the documentary about the whole Donkey Kong, everything, that got a lot of people's attention, got a lot of people into documentaries. Bowling for Columbine got a lot of people into documentaries. Super Size Me, is definitely one of those. It was one of those things that even for people who weren't into documentaries, they heard about it. The concept of what happens to a guy physically, mentally, everything, if all he does is eat McDonald's for a month. And it wasn't just a quick little gimmick too. It started some serious conversations. And it was one of those touchstone moments for documentary films. I think it was because it was one of those documentaries that got people into documentaries. For that reason, I think it's one of the more important documentaries that's ever been made. Not because the subject matter was the most important, but because it was a documentary that got people into documentaries. You know what I mean? And because of that, it was, I think it was a really important one. I was really sad to hear that he passed away. He was so young too, man. So young. I think it was what, 53 or something like that? Anyway. All right, next up. Amin writes, what are your thoughts on Civil War? Oh, I've talked about it many times on the show, Amin. I mean, it was not the movie I was expecting it to be. All right. Like I went in, I think the marketing led me to believe it was going to be one kind of movie. It was very different kind of movie, but I still thoroughly enjoyed it. Like not a guaranteed Best Picture nominee that I was kind of expecting, but I thought it was a very, very good movie. Just a very different movie from what I was expecting. That's all, but still really good. Kaiser Soze writes, hey, John, I know you think Wanda probably isn't coming back, but Kevin Feige said there really is so much more to explore. We still haven't touched on many of her core storylines from the comics. Yeah, but he said stuff like that about a lot of different characters. Look, is it possible that we could see Wanda return? Yes. Yeah, you'll never hear me say that it's not possible. It's absolutely possible that we could see Wanda Maximoff return, see Scarlet Witch come back. But I don't know that she wants to come back. I don't know that Elizabeth Olsen wants to come back. In a lot of her interviews, she's talked about, I mean, she's always been very complimentary about her time playing Wanda, very complimentary about the MCU, all that kind of stuff. But everything she's ever said kind of leads me to believe that she's done. And while you could recast her, because I think somebody in the live chat's bring that up. While you could recast her, you kind of brought her storyline to a conclusion. I personally think Wanda is the best. Somebody brought up Loki, and Loki's is a great one. I think Wanda has the best character arc in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I really do. From where we first met her, how she then developed, ultimately what turned her, and at the very end, kind of having her own Darth Vader doing one good thing at the very end, right? Her ending was very Darth Vaderish, right? Just doing one good thing at the very end. So I think her character arc was spectacular. And it ended. And see, here's the other problem. She's a problem in the MCU because she's so powerful. Her power level literally becomes a problem for storytelling. She's that powerful. I mean, when you have her ripping apart the Illuminati from a different Earth and then ripping apart the Sorcerer Supreme and all wizards and sorcerers standing with them, that character is just too powerful to have around, I think. Now, by the way, Sir Malston, I want to point something out. Sir Malston, Groot had a great character arc too. No, he didn't. Groot is a great character, but Groot literally died in the first movie he was in. Not people forget, Groot died in the first Guardians of the Galaxy. The Groot we have after that is a new character. That's not the same Groot. Kevin Feige's said this explicitly. James Gunn has said this explicitly. So we literally had two different Groots in the MCU. We had the Groot of the first movie, and then this new creature that was born later from Groot's slivers, wood chips. Anyway, so they're actually two different characters. Don't forget that. All right. Let's see. Next up, we've got James Wheeler, who sends in a $20 super chat. Thank you, James, for supporting us on that level, man. Appreciate that, dude. And James writes, wow, I watched Furiosa and absolutely loved it. The revenge she gets is amazing, and that's all I'll say. Yeah, Furiosa, again, I'm going to admit something. You know I'm not big on prequel stories, right? Everybody knows that. And George Miller is now almost 80. He's like a few months away from being 80. I'm going to admit, when they first announced that they were doing Furiosa, I didn't know. I mean, it's George Miller, so I'm intrigued, of course, right? But I mean, if I'm being really honest with you, I didn't have a lot of expectations. Because are you going to go back to this well again, and you're doing it as a prequel, and you're going to do it without Charlize Theron? And I had all these doubts. I had doubts, right? Then I went to CinemaCon. They showed us a bunch of footage, and it looked great. Really did. But man, the movie ended up being much better than I thought. I thought it was just an absolutely terrific movie. It's unfortunate that it's not doing the box office business that it deserves to do, because the movie is great. It really, it's a great movie. Again, I'm not going to say that it's good enough. It's better than Fury Road. I'm not saying that, but it's great. And if you have not seen Furiosa yet, go out and see it. Particularly if you saw and liked Fury Road. If you liked Fury Road, you're going to love Furiosa. I guarantee it. All right. Not everybody will, but I think if you like Fury Road, I don't see how you don't like this one. Anyway. All right. Christopher Brickner writes. Thanks for that, James. Christopher Brickner writes, one of two. When it comes to Lucasfilm recasting, look at Obi-Wan Kenobi. Alec got an Oscar nomination, but when people think of Obi-Wan, they think of Ewan's version. No. Anyway, recasting a legacy character can make a new iconic portrayal of the character, and why Lucasfilm fear of recasting is bad. I am with you on that. I'm 100% with you on that. 100%. Recasting works. It works. They should have recast Leia. They just should have. After Carrie Fisher's tragic passing, they should have recast Leia. 100%. They should have recast T'Challa. 100%. I think the way you truly honor somebody that we've lost is to pick up the baton for them and carry on for them. I don't believe that the way you honor somebody is saying, oh, you did this work. All right, well, we're just going to leave it there and move on. Bye. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Chadwick Boseman does one of the most important characters the MCU's ever done in T'Challa. And then we tragically lost Chadwick Boseman. And you think that the way to honor him is like, oh, well, we're going to say T'Challa's gone now. Bye, T'Challa. We're going to move on to your sister. How's that? Your lab nerd sister. That makes no logical sense that she's the new Black Panther at all. Lupita Nyong'o's character should have been the new Black Panther. An actual warrior. You know, the warrior should have been the new Black Panther. But whatever. Okay, you went with the lab rat nerd sister who doesn't know how to fight. Okay, sure. Whatever. You had a logical Black Panther right there. Anyway, that aside. Carrie Fisher. Like, what they did with the Princess Leia character, and I get it. I've never been mad that they chose not to recast T'Challa because their heart's in the right place. They wanted to honor Chadwick. And so you can't be mad at them for wanting to honor Chadwick. I just disagreed with them vehemently about the best way to honor Chadwick. I couldn't get mad at them for not recasting Leia and just using recycled footage because their heart was in the right place. They wanted to honor Carrie. I can't be mad at anybody for wanting to honor Carrie. I just vehemently disagreed for how they wanted to honor Carrie. Anyway, but I'm going to say, Christopher, when you say, when it comes to Lucasfilm recasting Obi-Wan, whenever people think of Obi-Wan, they think of Ewan's version. That's not true. Some people do. Yes, absolutely some people do. But there's also a lot of people that there will only be one Obi-Wan for them, and that is Alec Guinness. I am personally of the opinion that the recasting of Obi-Wan with Ewan McGregor was a fabulous recasting and has worked out very well. Even if some of the movies he was in was terrible, the recasting of him was great. He's wonderful. And for me, in my head, when I think of Obi-Wan, I think of a mixture of the two. I think Alec Guinness and I think Ewan McGregor. But no, it is foundationally untrue to say people in general, when you think of Obi-Wan, you think of Ewan McGregor. Maybe if you're under 30. But there's still an awful lot of the OG Star Wars fans that it's Alec Guinness. It is definitively Alec Guinness. For me, it's a 50-50 thing. But anyway, yeah, there's that. All right. But yes, absolutely. proof positive that recasting works. There's that. All right. Thanks, Christopher. Good point, man. We've got Andy who writes, 1 of 4. Oh, dig in. Here we go. One of the most terrifying moments in Civil War was the sniper battle. The explanation was the soldiers were trying to kill the other person because they're trying to not a word. They're trying to get them. This felt so real because the person in the house is doing it out of fear. And if this country ever had another civil war, so many situations like it would happen. The U.S. isn't in a civil war, and the U.S. isn't in a civil war, and it's already has instances where people have shot at others who have mistaken their homes as a friend's place. I don't get why there are so few people in this country who desire. I don't get why there are a few, not why there are so few, why there are a few people in this country who desire another civil war. Okay, lot to unpack there, Andy, but listen, you're treading here on some like really profound thinking, right? It's the thing that terrified me about when watching the ads and the commercials for Civil War was that it feels a little close to home right now, right? It feels a little close to home. And that's not really what the movie was. The movie was really about something else, that rather than like the current cultural kind of cultural war that's going on now. I thought the movie was going to be touching on that. It doesn't really. It's about something else entirely, but still the premise is there. But yeah, there are just a lot of people, not comparatively, but a lot more people than I'm comfortable with, who just think it's so important to keep them gays in their place that they want a civil war. Keep them blacks in their place, so they want another civil war. Fly that Union Jack, so they want another civil war. There are more people in this country than I'm comfortable with who are so filled with hatred, who are so filled with angst and rage, and like I said, just pure hatred in their hearts, that to get rid of the things that they fear, they would prefer to have a civil war, and they're ready to do it. They're ready to do it. It's a very disturbing thing. It's a very, very disturbing thing. And, you know, I try very, very hard not to get into politics on this show, because to me, we're all movie fans. You know, Michael Jordan said, Republicans buy shoes too, right? And I agree with that. All of us are movie fans, right? I don't care if you're left. I don't care if you're right. I don't care if you're centric. I don't care, whatever. We're all movie fans, and movies should be a place that, you know, we can all get together and kind of talk. But unfortunately, there is an extreme, there's a growing extremist segment out there that has been bringing their politics into the movies discussions lately. Why are gay people in this movie? Why are black people in this movie? Why does that movie have to have a woman? Blah, 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 right? They've been bringing their politics into the movie sphere, and it's been making it more and more challenging for somebody like me who tries to avoid that kind of stuff. Like, I don't get into the discussions about, you need to keep black people out of that. You need to put black people in that. Like, I just, listen, man, I just love movies. I think almost any character can be played by almost anybody of any race, gender, sexual orientation. I don't care, whatever. But, you know, there's been this growing segment of hatred that have been more and more over the last couple of years, bringing their politics into the movie discussion. And you know the ones we're talking about. You can't go to their blog or to their podcast or to their YouTube channels or to their websites without every single headline being, you know, woke this, woke that. Why is this gay person in this? Why are they shoving women down our throat? Why are they, you know, it's just, and it makes it difficult to stay out of the conversation. It does. But I still try to stay out of the conversation. I still try not to go into my own personal political beliefs and things like that on this show and others like it. And you know what? As I get closer and closer to my retirement, which isn't anytime imminent, okay? It's minimum at least still a year away, probably maybe a year and a half away. It's still a long ways away. Don't worry about it. I'm just saying, to me, I got to admit, as I get closer to retiring, I care less and less about staying out of the conversation. I think at some point before I retire, me caring less and less about the need for me to stay out of those conversations is going to disappear. I think one of these days you're going to come to the John Campea Show and I'm just going to unload. I'm just going to like completely unload. And like really go off. And let me tell you what I really think about what's going on in the world. But that is not for now. For now, I still want the channel and the show to be, an apolitical place. Where like, regardless of whether we're right or left, and believe me, I have certain beliefs that would qualify more as right-leaning beliefs. And I have beliefs that are more left-leaning beliefs, whatever. But until that time, I'm going to continue to try to keep the show and the channel as apolitical as possible. And yeah, and it is what it is. But yes, things like that movie, man, it really does kind of spark a lot of fears about why some people feel that way and think that way and need to go away. But anyway, that's just that. All right. Thanks for that, Andy. Next up, Andy again writes, one of two. If you like Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes because of its theme of twisting a beautiful faith back to a person's worst tendencies, then I extremely recommend watching Midnight Mass on Netflix. I keep hearing that's really good. That show does the same and was basically made for you. Well, okay, let me be clear about something. I didn't like Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes because that was the theme, right? Movies can have great themes, but if you don't build wonderful movies around them, it doesn't do anything for you, right? Too many movies rely on having, we got this great theme, but they don't actually put in the work of making a good, solid movie around the theme. I thought Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes was a great movie because it's a great movie. As a great movie, I also really appreciated that central theme of taking a purity of a certain faith and then certain people in power twisting and mutilating that faith into something that they can leverage for their own power. I do really like, that's a very big topic to me personally. But I've heard Midnight Mass is really good and I've never gotten around to it. I know I'm not going to be able to get around to it anytime in the next few months because I got a lot of things piling up on my to-do list. And we've got The Boys is coming back. House of the Dragon is coming back. I'm suddenly hearing good things about The Acolyte. I hope that's good. I still have my doubts, but I hope it's good. So it's probably going to be a while before I get around to it, but I keep getting people telling me that, Andy, that I need to watch it. So one of these days I'm going to have to do that. Thanks for that, Andy. Thanks for the recommendation. Next up, Kaiser Soze writes, watching X-Men 97 has made me hope Anna Paquin cameos as Rogue and Deadpool. In her proper costume, flying physically strong, full of Southern charm. I wouldn't discount. I think I've kind of said I don't count on it for that happening, but I think the more I think about it, there could be a real possibility there of that cameo. Now again, when I talk about Deadpool cameos, I'm talking about them in the sense of all the character cameos we had in Ready Player One, right? How many pop cultural characters did we see in Ready Player One? 100? More? Most of them didn't have lines and most of them weren't on screen for more than 3 or 4 seconds, but there was this ton of pop cultural cameos in Ready Player One. And I think we could get a lot of cameos that are like that in Deadpool. It won't make the movie better. Lacking them won't make the movie worse. I just think it'd be a neat little thing. Could I see Anna Paquin maybe doing one of those? Yes, because one of the things that we never really saw was the post-Captain Marvel absorption Rogue, right? we've always gotten the pre-Captain Marvel power absorption Rogue. And it would be kind of neat even just to get a little glimpse of that. Even just a little peek at that, I think would be kind of cool. All right. Thanks for that, Kaiser Soze. Next up, Stargirl sends in a $20 super chat. Thank you, Stargirl, for supporting us in that level. And Stargirl writes, just finished the 3rd season of A Race Across the World. I'm not familiar with this show. It was set in Canada. Well, then I like it already. They had to get from one side to the other without using mobile phones. They had to get from one side of Canada to the other without using mobile phones. And I have to say, Canada is beautiful. Definitely on my backpacking bucket list. Look, I am obviously a little bit biased, maybe, maybe, not exactly the most objective person in this. I am thoroughly hardcore Canadian, unabashedly. Canada is the greatest country in the world. I know that, look, everybody obviously from any country believes their country is the greatest country in the world. I am no exception. Canada is truly the most beautiful country in the world, man. Every once in a while, like when I lived in Saskatchewan, for a few years, where I could see the northern lights every night. It was like, it was breathtaking. It also had minus 40-degree winters. The minus 40-degree winters is not so fun. Even for a Canadian, minus 40 degrees is not a lot of fun. Thankfully, there was only a few weeks of that. But from, I always say, Toronto is New York without the crime and dirt. Not that there's no crime in Toronto. I'm just saying comparatively. Toronto's like one of the great, and I hate saying that as somebody from Hamilton, because Hamilton, Toronto are bitter enemies, but Toronto really might be the greatest city in the world. Next to Hamilton, of course. And then like you get to like literally the most beautiful place on earth is Banff in British Columbia and Alberta. Banff, Lake St. Louis is like just, you've just never been anywhere more breathtakingly beautiful. Like you think this is photoshopped. It's just, oh my God. Northern Ontario, once you get up around Thunder Bay and things like that, Manitoba's gorgeous. Saskatchewan, it's got so many different environments. Like you go from one, like Canada is definitely not a Star Wars movie where every planet is one environment. It's a forest planet. It's a desert planet. It's a water planet. No. You go from one end of Canada to the other, you are going to get in every kind of landscape, from the flatland rolling wheat fields to gorgeous, beautiful mountains and lakes to just the most beautiful thing. Listen, I mean, obviously yeah, I'm a Canadian homeboy. I am, but it is the greatest place in the world, man. Canada is the greatest place in the world. And it is why I am so, and I love the United States. I love being here. My wife's American. I've lived here for 15 years. I love the United States. It's great. I love this country. But there is no country in the world like Canada. And you're just going to have to allow me as a Canadian to believe it, because it's just like everybody, I'm sure every Swedish person thinks Sweden's the greatest country in the world. Everyone from Norway thinks Norway's the greatest country in the world. Everyone from Finland thinks Finland's the greatest country in the world. So you're just going to have to allow me as well as a Canadian to sit here and say, Canada's the greatest country in the world. And if you haven't gone, and I really encourage you, if you got some vacation time or whatever, sometime you want to take some travel, some trip, dude, go visit Canada. Go from Niagara Falls to Victoria, British Columbia. Man, you're going to have the time of your life, dude. I absolutely guarantee it. Absolutely guarantee it. Anyway, I'm such a Canadian homeboy. It's crazy. Anyway. All right. Next up. Glad you like that show, Stargirl. And thanks for putting that on my radar. I'd never heard of A Race Across the World. I'm going to have to check this out. All right. Next up, we've got Gone with the Cheetah writes, Furiosa had me thinking, do you think James Gunn and George Miller have talked about a DC project? Would you be down for it? Miller was about to do Justice League, then got canceled days before filming. Yeah, a lot of people forget about that. George Miller was going to do a Justice League movie. with Armie Hammer as Batman. He was cast and everything. Armie Hammer, before most people had ever heard of him. Armie Hammer was going to be Batman. Anyway, I've had a chance to read the script from that movie, what that movie was going to be. It had potential, my friends. It had potential. I mean, then again, I've read several scripts that had potential to be great, and then the movies just ended up not being great. But I mean, this script had potential. I thought it maybe could have been really good. I don't know at this point. Like I said, George Miller is about to turn 80 years old. He's obviously, and James Gunn isn't going to get to a Justice League movie for at least 4 years at most. Do you have George Miller come in and an 84, 85-year-old George Miller come in and direct a thing? Look, I certainly ain't going to say that he couldn't do it. I'm not going to be the one to say that George Miller can't do anything, but it seems doubtful at this point. I don't know. Who knows? Possibilities abound, my friend. Possibilities abound. All right. Big Mouth Stan writes, are you more excited for The Boys or House of the Dragon to return to TV? Dude, oh man. Okay, first of all, I freaking love both of these shows so much. You guys know this. I love House of the Dragon. I love The Boys so much. I'm going to say I'm probably a little bit more excited for House of the Dragon, and hear me out as to why. I think the reason I'm more excited about House of the Dragon is because I've gotten less of it, right? I've already had several wonderful servings of The Boys. I've already had several seasons of The Boys, and it's lost none of its potency. I'm still super excited to see it, but I think I will give the slight edge in my excitement level to House of the Dragon because I've had so much less of it than I've had of The Boys. Can't wait to see both. Super excited about both, but because we're only going into season 2 for House of the Dragon, and I love both of the shows so much, I'm a little bit more excited to get my second serving, if you will. I've had my second and third servings of The Boys. I haven't had my second serving of House of the Dragon yet, so I'll say House of the Dragon. Great question, though. All right. And again, the bottom line is I'm super stoked for both of them. All right. Renato writes, hi from Portugal. I noticed in the Deadpool 3 trailer on Disney Plus, they changed the joke from pegging to R rating. Do you think this means they'll change the movie when it hits streaming? No. I'm going to assume that what you saw was on television. That's just the assumption I'm going to make here, that what you saw was on television. And on television, they probably don't want to say pegging in some countries. But when you see the movie or when it goes on streaming, they'll have it in its original, I think. I think you'll hear pegging. I don't think they're going to change it. They might have changed a few things for marketing, but my guess, and it's only a guess, Renato, it's only a guess, but my guess is when you actually see the movie, it will have the original language in that, which is, of course, the wonderful act of pegging. I still don't know that something's ever made me laugh so hard in a movie as that. What is it? Happy Women's Day? Is that what it was? Anyway, it's an uncomfortable thing. Dwayne Fernandez writes, do you think the MCU will start bringing back old Marvel characters for more movies? X-Men, Spider-Man, etc. Since they get money. It seems people love nostalgia and seeing old recognizable characters. Here's the thing, though. I mean, first of all, they're already in the midst of doing Spider-Man movies. They're doing X-Men movies. Like, they do lots of, like, Iron Man's been around forever. Captain America's been around forever. I mean, other than Ms. Marvel, there's not, even Shang-Chi's been around a long time. So it's not about bringing back old characters. Like most 95% of Marvel characters are at least more than a decade old, right? But here's the thing. For every one nostalgia thing that works, I can point you to one nostalgia thing that didn't work. Like nostalgia can be a good thing that works in your favor, but we've seen many examples of when a nostalgia play doesn't necessarily work out. I don't think, oh, nostalgia equals money. I don't think that equation works out. I don't think it does. I think nostalgia is a thing that can work. I think the nostalgia is a thing that sometimes doesn't work. Not to mention old characters. I mean, Marvel basically is old characters, right? Old Marvel characters, X-Men, Spider-Man, Captain America, Iron Man, Hulk, Thor. They're all the X-Men. I mean, they're basically all old characters. Not all of them are 50 or 60 years old, but basically they're all old characters. So yes, I think they'll continue to use old characters because that's really what they are in their entirety. All right. Thanks for that, Dwayne. Next up, Moda Awesome writes, John, speaking of the best comic book movie trilogies, I heard you mention Dark Knight, Guardians, and Cap trilogies. I think if Beyond the Spider-Verse sticks the landing, it'll be the #1 comic book movie trilogy. Okay, let me put, you know how much I love the Spider-Verse films. It's not a trilogy yet. Into the Spider-Verse should have been nominated for Best Picture the year it came out. Across the Spider-Verse absolutely should have been nominated for Best Picture. There is no reality that Across the Spider-Verse was not one of the 10 best films of the year. It was a top 3 best film of the year. Anyway, I'm not going to go off on a rant on that. So if Beyond the Spider-Verse, the third film, is on par with Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse, I am not ready to say that it is the greatest of all time, because that Captain America trilogy is very difficult to beat. First Avenger, Civil War, Winter Soldier, that's a very, very tough thing to beat. The Dark Knight trilogy, The Dark Knight Rises notwithstanding, I don't think The Dark Knight Rises is all that great. I like it. It's a thumbs up for me. I like The Dark Knight Rises. Don't get me wrong, but it's not all that great. Guardians of the Galaxy is wonderful. It's got one little weak link, which I think is Guardians 2. Good. Another good movie. I like Guardians 2, but it's not on the same level as the first Guardians or Guardians 3. I'll at least go far as to say this. If Beyond the Spider-Verse is on par with Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse, and that's a very difficult thing to do, but if it's on par with those two other films, it gets in the conversation. It gets in the conversation. And then people are going to have to start having these conversations again about just how good Sony is. Oops, sorry, did I say that out loud? Sorry, but a lot of you are just going to have to start revisiting your preconceived notions about exactly how good Sony is. Yeah, I get it. Sony gave us, Madam Web and Morbius. I get that. I do. I get it. I get that. But Sony also gave us Spider-Man 1 and gave us a film a lot of people still think is in the conversation for maybe the greatest comic book film of all time, Spider-Man 2. And Sony gave us the first Amazing Spider-Man. And so Sony gave us Into the Spider-Verse, and Sony gave us Across the Spider-Verse. And if Beyond the Spider-Verse is as good, and that's a big if, as those other two, I mean, a lot of people are going to have very uncomfortable conversations about just how good Sony can be. We know how bad Sony can be, right? Morbius, Madam Web, we get it. I know. And that's a fair conversation to have about how bad Sony can be with these characters. But you're going to be forced to no longer ignore how good they can be. And I know the trendy thing is just talk about how bad Sony is. Oh, look how cool I am. I'm saying Sony's bad. I'm sorry. Sorry, not sorry. But even without Beyond the Spider-Verse, Sony, all due respect to the Tom Holland Spider-Man films, because I love the Tom Holland Spider-Man films. Homecoming, No Way Home, Far From Home. I love all three of those films, okay? I adore those films, and I love Tom Holland as Spider-Man, so no disrespect to those films at all. But Sony has made the 3 best Spider-Man movies. Spider-Man 2, Into the Spider-Verse, and Across the Spider-Verse are definitively the 3 best Spider-Man movies. of course that's subjective. I shouldn't have to tell you it's subjective. You should just assume whenever I say stuff like that, you know, I'm saying that with the understanding that all film is subjective. I'm saying this from my point of view. But from my point of view, Sony, not Marvel, has made the 3 definitively best Spider-Man movies. With Spider-Man 2, Into the Spider-Verse, and Across the Spider-Verse. I think they're, as much as I love Tom Holland's films, I think they're better than all of Tom Holland's films. And if Across the Spider-Verse, Beyond the Spider-Verse, the third one, is as good as those other 2, they will have the 4 best Spider-Man movies. Again, I'm not denying how bad Sony can make these movies. We've just got Madam Web and Morbius. No doubt, I know how bad they can make the movies. But for those of you people who only want to talk about that part of the conversation and ignore the part of the conversation of how good they can make the movies, if Beyond the Spider-Verse is right up there with those other 2, you're going to kind of be forced to have to confront that part of the conversation finally. Because Sony can make some bad films. You're not getting any argument from me. But it's too many people ignore the fact that they can also and have made some fabulous films as well. So we'll see. We'll see. Anyway, thanks for that, man. I get very passionate when you start talking about the Spider-Verse animated movies. I love those movies so much. All right. Thanks for that, Moda Awesome. And our last question today comes to us from Lazarus, rising up to give us the last question of the day. He writes, "Hey, John, I will be attending UFC 302. I'm jealous. Can't wait. What are your picks for the co-main event and main events? Thanks and keep up the great work." I lose track. Is that the Poirier one? Oh, a second. UFC 302 card. Because I've lost track numerically. Oh, yeah. Makhachev versus Poirier. Listen, I love Dustin. I love Dustin Poirier so much. He's like him. Like fighters like him, the maestro of violence. I just love these guys. But I think, I don't know that anybody's going to beat Makhachev anytime soon. Like, unless Khabib Nurmagomedov comes out of retirement to beat his pupil, I don't see anybody beating him anytime. So, unfortunately, I don't see Dustin Poirier beating him. Strickland, we'll have to see if he's recovered from losing the belt. Has that changed? Has losing the belt changed him? Otherwise, I fairly comfortably have him beating Paulo Costa. But you never know. I've got Holland winning. I've got Alameda winning. I've got Dos Santos winning. Kopilov, probably. Dawson. Matthews. Price. I mean, so that's where I'll go that. But yeah, I mean, that's going to be a wonderful fight, Dustin Poirier and Islam Makhachev. Of course, Islam's mentor and big brother, Khabib Nurmagomedov, beat Dustin Poirier fairly handily. So I think he will beat Dustin. But I'll tell you what, I'll be cheering for Dustin. Dustin's the greatest, maybe the greatest fighter not to hold an actual title. He had an interim title, but that's not the real title. So anyway, all right, guys. And that'll do it for today's installment of Open Mic. Thank you so much for being here and making this little video and stream a part of your day, guys. I love just hanging out on the weekends like this and chatting movies with you guys. I appreciate all of you who are here hanging out. Big special thank you to all you guys who sent in those questions. Number one, because you gave us fun, interesting things to talk about. But number two, you supported our channel by sending in those questions, and all of us involved with the channel. Thank you guys so very much for your support. Don't forget, guys, to come back and join us again next week. I will talk to you guys later. My name's John Campea, and until next time, my good friends, bye-bye.